And good evening, everybody. I've got 4 people watching so far, so I'll just share this and I'll get a few more in. Here we go. Hang on. Oh, go on. I know. It's all right. It ain't going to work. Hang on. Let me just go to... I'm just going to go to my other browser. Excuse me. Oh, pardon me. Right. So, share. Twitter. Tweet. And Facebook. Share. Right, so hello, Hugo. First guy in tonight. Hugo, how are you? I hope you're all right. You say Ben and all. It's only you and me so far, mate. I don't know where the others are. Hopefully they'll all turn up soon. Got 9 people watching. So we'll just wait for a few more people to arrive. I hope you're all right, Hugo. Hope you're doing okay. I'm still studying about the history of Britain and things like that. Hello, Luke. Greetings. How are you, Luke? You all right? Oh, good. It's nice to see. I should get my notes together while I'm waiting for you guys to arrive. Yeah, so where are we? Right. I've got it all here. Oh dear, I don't know where to start really. Hello, Lime Specs. Brexit! Yeah, Brexit! Yeah. How are you? How are you guys? Hugo, Luke, Lime Specs got 10 people watching. I might put a few tags on Facebook to get a few more people in. I've got to just mention that I'm here. So I've got so I know who to play. I'll put Cosmic Claire. Oops. She might have already seen this. And I'll just right. That's Edwardian lady. And who else? All right, Mrs. B. And who else? Who often watches? Oh yeah. Okay. Hugh Linefield, not feeling confident about it, Ben. Well, we're going to go into that. Yeah, things have changed. It's taken a long time, but things have. Hugo Roon says, question, if Scotland goes independent, that will be the end of the Union Jack. Where is Wales represented in the UJ? I mean, UK. Do you mean UK? Represented in the UK? Yeah, if Scotland goes independent, then basically, yeah. Well, Scotland will be told its independence. That the referendum, which is coming up, which, to be fair, there is a legitimate cause for it now with Brexit, for a second referendum. But its independence will be basically leaving the United Kingdom and entering in the European Union in a single step. Which, to call that independence, is the ultimate in Orwellian doublethink. It's the ultimate frying pan fire situation. And Wales will the general consensus in so-called Welsh nationalism is pretty much the same. Most Welsh nationalists are what they call federalists in Welsh politics. That means somebody who wants the same thing. Leanne Wood, the leader of Plaid Cymru, is essentially a federalist. My uncle is a federalist. Hugo Roon, the flag, England, Scotland, Ireland, all there in various crosses. What part of the Union Jack represents Wales? None of it, none of it. That's the bad thing. The reason is because Wales was essentially became part of England in the Act of Union of, I think it was 1512. It was under Henry VIII, which essentially eliminated Wales from existence. So when the Act of Union with Scotland in 1812 came along, 1548 Act of Union with Wales, it's called the Act of Union in inverted commas in Wales. An Act of Union with Wales, 1536. That's it. I knew it was a 15 something. It's Henry VIII Act 1536, which essentially eliminated Wales altogether as any form of political entity. And so when the actual flag, which didn't exist back then, was created, then there was no need to include Wales because Wales didn't exist. Really, the situation, the 1536 Act, only changed with the creation of the Welsh Assembly in 1990, whenever that was. So Union Jack has no place for Wales on it. I used to think that when I was a kid, actually, because of course Wales has a flag, the Red Dragon. So anyway, hello videos from the underground, and hello James Tilly Matthews, evening truth juicers. Welcome all of you. We've got 11 people watching now. So welcome all of you. I hope you're all well. I don't know if we're going to get any more. I hope you got. I know some people are not bored of these live streams anyway. So that's something. But I'll try to keep them interesting. Otherwise, and I realise I'm overdue for a comments reply video as well. Hello, Simon. How are you? Greetings. Simon Tucker is in the chat. I will be doing a comments reply video as soon as I can, which will be it'll have to be, I don't know, have to be after the 31st, I think. Hello, Kloppite. We'll have to leave you soon. I'm going to watch the Mighty Reds. Oh, right, Kloppite. Yeah. That's the. I've missed something in the rugby, have I? Let's have a look. Hang on. I don't want to miss anything in the rugby, do I? Where are we now? Semi-finals. Oh, England. We got South Africa, and it's Sunday. That's the important match. Sunday the 27th, starting 9 a.m. our time. We've got to take on the Springboks. Now, we beat that game against France. I watched the recording. It was bloody nail-biting. I knew what happened, of course, as you know, from my Boris Letters video. I was actually... Schenk versus Liverpool. Oh, right, Kloppite. Yeah, I see. Okay, it's the round ball game. Okay, well, good luck with that. Good luck, Liverpool. Video says Welsh dragon sign at the border of Wales. That's right. That's the border, which was basically non-existent politically from 1536 until 1990. Was it 1992? Whenever the assembly was created. But you see, Wales. If Wales follows Scotland into the EU, that leaves England as the only nation that's a leave nation, and there is no UK. There's no United Kingdom. As for Northern Ireland, what the hell are they going to do? I mean, I understand the concerns of the DUP. I do. I do understand, because their whole, whether it's legitimate or not, their whole existence is on keeping Northern Ireland out of a united Ireland. Whether they can do that, and whether the opinion will change at some point, which will mean that the nightmare scenarios that have been envisaged by the Ulster Unionists won't come to pass. I don't know, but I can't see them all doing that. I think they're going to be a lot of them are going to be very against that. Yeah, well. So we got 16 watching now. Hello, James Tilly Matthews. They kicked Kenny Dalglish out of Liverpool. Unforgivable. Oh. Who's running the shop now then, James? I don't keep up with football, unfortunately. I do like football, but I'm not like a football fan. Not a major football fan. Anyway, guys, I'm going to start today's lead off. And more can join in as time goes on, because I've got quite a lot of notes here. First of all, I've got to apologise. Hang on. It's always talking about football still. All right, guys. As always, while I'm reading the lead off, if you address me a question during this time in the comments, I can't promise to answer it, because I'll basically be de-trolling. Depending on how many people turn up, we only got 17 people so far. So I might have time to go back and read the comments during the lead-off bit, but I can't guarantee it. What I'll do is I'll check the comments for trolls and just delete the trolls. Although I haven't had any trolls for a few days, which means it could be the trolls are giving up. I hope so. Because they know I just delete everything they put in there as soon as I see it. And then I will deal with your comments. But first of all, I've got to go to my notes. So firstly, I know I said I would do a live stream on Monday or yesterday, and I couldn't. I'm afraid I didn't have time, basically. Monday, there wasn't enough to report on Monday, and I'll come on to that in a minute. It wasn't really worth doing a live stream on Monday. I was very tired anyway. and I'd been doing a lot, and I'd actually had to do some recording on Monday with someone else as well, and sort of arrange things for the upcoming Hapanwo show tomorrow night. So I was too tired, really, and also there's not a lot to report, so I didn't do the live stream on Monday. Yesterday, and I'd forgotten all about this, and I checked my diary. Yesterday I was on the Kev Baker show. I couldn't really do a live stream and go straight. If I'd done a live stream and gone straight onto the Kev Baker show, I'd been sort of like 5 hours online, internet talking, and even I can't cope with that. But there's of course we were all anticipating a lot, because after Boris made his heroic stand by sending off his unsigned letter to the EU, which I thought was an amazingly creative and daring thing to do. I always thought that Monday there'd be a big kickoff, and there wasn't. The legislation that was due to be implemented on Monday, that is the debate over the withdrawal agreement bill, never took place because old John Bercow, the poison dwarf, put a stop to it. He wouldn't let it happen. So Monday was as abortive and really as much of an anticlimax as Saturday was, the so-called Super Saturday. In fact, Norman Smith of the BBC came up with it. He called it Mañana Monday. He said Super Saturday and then Mañana Monday. Mañana is it means tomorrow morning in Spanish, and so it was supposed to be meaningful Monday for a meaningful vote on the withdrawal agreement bill, and it didn't happen. Mañana means tomorrow, on tomorrow morning. I mean, George Orwell in Homage to Catalonia talks about how the Spaniards always are very, very. The Spaniards are notorious for procrastinating, according to him. And he said that you say you want them to do something, they'll say, "Oh, mañana," which means they'll do it tomorrow. And he said that's what the Spanish are like, and he found that when he was in Spain. Homage to Catalonia is about his experience of living in Spain during the Spanish Civil War, and very interesting book. So John Bercow put a stop to it, which meant that they couldn't deal with it then. The EU Parliament did not ratify the deal either. I think the EU Parliament is actually waiting for the UK Parliament to ratify it, basically by passing the bill, and then they would debate it, and that's what they're doing now. But anyway, they said the European Parliament will not ratify the Brexit deal and wait for Westminster to pass the withdrawal agreement bill. And could meet for an extraordinary session next week. But Commons Speaker John Bercow refused the government's call to hold a meaningful vote on the deal. He said it will be repetitive and disorderly. I think that's what he is, basically. And then a fuss broke out about how basically a lot of the opposition feel that Boris Johnson is steamrolling this bill through Parliament. He said that it needs at least 500 hours of debate, and there's like 110 pages of this. As it turns out, this is actually it's not that difficult. There's many other MPs have made many decisions on like this. I mean, a lot of bills are presented to Parliament have much more than 110 pages, and the House of Commons votes on them after just one day. I mean, one of the notorious things about the New World Order is a lot of stealth authoritarian legislation is passed by the House of Commons when they haven't even looked at it. I mean, we know that because sometimes it's passed within hours or days, and there's hundreds of pages, and they don't look at them. They just rubber stamp them as they go through, like that. So obviously this is another obstruction tactic. So anyway, Donald Tusk on Monday also posted this. He said this. He tweeted, "My last words on the European extension. Thank you for your responsible position on Brexit and extension. After what I have heard in the chamber today, I have no doubt that we should treat the British request for an extension in all seriousness," which of course is extremely ambiguous, but it's the only public reply he's given to Boris Johnson's rather strange, half-hearted and contradictory requests, which I talked about in the movie I did on Sunday, Boris's Letters. There's a number of extensions being presented, including an extension to the transition period. Now, this isn't so bad. This is just simply extending the transition period by 2 years. This is an amendment because at the moment there's an extension period due to last until 13 months, and they want to make it last for an extra 2 years. So this is not delaying Brexit. This is simply delaying the post-Brexit transition. So that's but there's several other flashpoints within the withdrawal agreement bill. For example, the role of EU citizens who are granted special settled status. I mean, this could have affected my mother if she was alive, because she was a Dutch woman. But my mum came and lived in Britain before the EU even existed. Before the European Communities Act. She actually moved into Britain 5 years before the European Communities Act had been passed. So how that happened, it must have been a miracle. She wasn't an illegal immigrant or anything, but she managed to get in here anyway. It all went. It was all by the end of Monday. At the moment, they were trying to get the deal approved, and everyone was predicting the deal would not be approved by Parliament. The Democratic Unionist Party, those are the allies with it, are actually in a coalition with the Conservatives. Although it was pretty meaningless now. They're 40 seats down in minority. They said they would vote against the deal. They say they're worried about how it affects Northern Ireland. Indeed, I've said I feel very sorry for Northern Ireland, the way that little province has been used and abused by Theresa May and the Remoaners in general to try and stop Brexit. That little country has been basically used as a punch bag and a kick and a football in the whole game. And this is going to cause a lot of problems with people in Northern Ireland. There's even talk about the Good Friday Agreement breaking down and things like that, which is pretty awful. And so this, by the end of Monday, my Artusi uploaded a video. Even he was subdued in that one, because he's normally the white pill. He's the big YouTube white pill, but he was subdued. And Calamity made a video. He was swearing in his usual way, talking about ball bags and stuff like that. But I was quite disturbed to see my Artusi with a frown on his face. Then what happened was, in the end, that Boris on Tuesday morning made an incredible. He raised the stakes enormously. He's quite a gambler. He said that he would immediately withdraw the bill and call a general election if the House of Commons did not approve of the deal. Now, Theresa May never threatened to do this. So they threatened all the sorts of call for a general election, which he's actually done before, and it was turned down by the House of Commons. But he said that there's an election due, not the election, thanks to Theresa May's 2017 debacle. There's no general election due until 2022 under the Fixed Term Elections Act, which is basically 5 years minimum. But what he wants to do, his plan, is to restore a Conservative majority in the House of Commons, because at the moment the mess left by Theresa May is partly the reason we're in this situation now, because she destroyed her party's position in Commons because she suffered from hubris and thought she could do what Boris wants to do now, although Boris has a better chance of doing it. He's 45 seats down, as I said, which means basically the opposition have been ganging up on him, which is why a lot of people are saying he'll never get his deal through. Monday evening, people say the deal probably will fail. This is the deal that has been approved of by the European Commission. So if an election was called, well, there's at least a 5-week gap between polling day, which means, again, this takes us over the effective Brexit deadline, which is in blimey, it's 10 days. Actually, no, it's not. It's actually, and it's gone down now since I wrote these notes. It's actually 8 days. It's actually tomorrow week. We've got 8 days. So obviously, if an election takes place, does that mean what will that mean? Make it more or less likely there'll be an extension on another fucking extension to the Brexit period? Oh, that'd be a nightmare, wouldn't it? So we won't really know more right now what's going to happen in terms of general elections. But anyway, so then, of course, 7 p.m. on 7 p.m. on Tuesday, the actually withdrawal agreement bill went to the vote, and people were predicting it was going to go. And guess what? They passed it. Ayes 329, noes 99. So they passed it with a majority of 30, which in the current House of Commons is a pretty incredible majority. That's virtually a landslide by current standards, considering the government is 45 seats down. So 30, that was incredible. So basically, that was a very decisive approval of the EU withdrawal agreement bill, which became an act. So it's progressed to its second reading. Now, the second reading is the name for the first major hurdle. The bill must pass on its way to becoming law. The debate gives MPs the chance to discuss the general principles of the proposed legislation. If passed, MPs will then move on to voting for the programme motion. That is the motion setting the amount of time MPs are allowed to debate the bill. Now, this is the thing. This is what happened after that. The second reading is yet to happen, but there's a timetable for that because it goes on to the committee stage where separate workshops are set up to conduct various elements of the bill, because it has to be studied and picked apart. We already have the Letwin Amendment, which actually forces a very, very detailed dissection of the entire bill and the proposal for the entire Withdrawal Act. And, well, guess what happened? Half an hour later, they voted on the second major motion of Tuesday, which was the Brexit bill timetable, and it was rejected. The MPs voted to reject the they rejected the government's Brexit bill timetable by 14 votes. Ayes 308, noes 322. So they'd rejected that particular timetable, this very speedy timetable. This is why they were accusing Boris Johnson of steamrolling the bill through Parliament, getting it through before anyone had a chance to read it, which, as I said before, MPs have never given a damn about that before when they're rubber stamping various Big Brother legislation and things like that. They don't give a damn about it normally. This is obviously another attempt to put the whole process into slow gear. And this is what they've done. They've jammed this entire processing of the Withdrawal Act into a low gear, so it trundles along very, very slowly, which will make the whole which will make basically a delay more likely from the EU, things like that. Somebody actually said something very interesting. A BBC reporter said that the ratio of MPs supporting the withdrawal bill was 52.48. Now, that's the same ratio of voters who voted leave in the 2016 referendum. And that's a really odd piece of synchronicity, isn't it? Anyway, the general feeling in the EU was relief. I mean, this is the thing. I mean, it was an odd situation because the passing of the withdrawal bill should have been an incredible moment of victory. This is what Theresa May tried to do 3 times with her bill and failed. And of course, the EU, basically everyone was texting saying finally. There was almost like a kind of viral text which just said the word finally, #Brexit finally, meaning that they're pleased that this bill has been passed. It doesn't mean it's the end of the story. They're just glad that this milestone has been passed. That is, that the Westminster Parliament has also approved the withdrawal deal. But of course, that's not the end of it. And I mean, we still really, the ball is in their court at the moment about what's going to happen in terms of the Brexit. Basically the process now is going to go ahead. The progress that's been made. It's really up to them. And now Boris threatened, like I said, if they didn't approve the timetable, he was going to pause he said that if they didn't approve the deal, he'd call a general election and withdraw the entire bill. They've approved the bill, but they've rejected the timetable. So what he's done is, Boris has said, we will not overlook the significance of the moment. He was actually pleased that the bill had been passed. But he says, I must express my disappointment that the House has voted to delay rather than a timetable that would have guaranteed the UK could leave on Halloween. We face further uncertainty. And it says here, very importantly, the government must take the only responsible course and accelerate our preparations for a no-deal outcome. Until the EU have reached a decision, we will pause this legislation. I expect that that was like a covert little nudge in the ribs to the EU to say, don't give us, look, we're preparing for no deal. Why don't you just give us no deal? Let's go out on WTO. If this is how appalling the Parliament is, they must realise that any extension the EU grants to Westminster now is simply going to embolden the Remainers. What are they going to do? They keep giving these extensions in the hope that it will make good. They hope the Parliament, which wants to make good use of them, in order to help progress the deal. But no, every extension that's been given has been used by the Ramonas to just make mischief and try and slow the process down. So really, we can't. Really, it'll be very, very bad if we get another extension. It'll be very bad indeed. I don't know where we may even find out tonight, depending on how long the European Council takes to make its bloody mind up. I'm hoping, of course, the ideal situation they'll say no extension. That's what I'm hoping for. Because, as I said, any extension will not work in the favour of Brexit. I mean, it's true Boris has made some headway now that Theresa May never made. He's made some progress. He's fought against the tide, but the tide is still there, and any extension will just be used by them to create more obstructions and slow the process down, put the brakes on, generally keep it in this low gear they want to keep it in to make it take as long as possible, in the hope that people will wear out, the public and the politicians will become weary, and maybe they'll be able to slip in a second referendum or even a revocation of Article 50 or a general election at the point which Labour can then commit electoral fraud to make sure they win it and essentially take over the country and cancel Brexit altogether, with the help of the Lib Dems, no doubt. That's what they hope to do. This is why any extension is bad. If there is an extension, well, the one in the letter, the unsigned letter, was 3 months. That's the 31st of bloody January. 3 bloody months more. However, there's possibly going to be a compromise of a shorter extension if that comes about, maybe even as short as a month or less. That obviously would be better than a 3 fucking month extension, but we don't know what's going to happen. We just don't know. Ideally, there'll be no extension. I'll just say, look, either get your deal together within the next week, or we kick you out WTO. We may find out this evening, or we may have to wait until the evening of Halloween evening before we finally know for certain what's going to go on. This is rather like the formation of Israel. I was watching a documentary about the formation of the State of Israel. I'm not supportive of that, by the way. I don't support Israel anyway. I'm not a Zionist. But it was an interesting piece of work, because it was basically went the same way. There was no one was certain there was going to be a State of Israel, literally until the day it happened. It was a very turbulent thing. There was some fighting, and there looked like it could end up in a war. And it seems like Brexit is very similar. Anyway, Jeremy Corbyn said that the PM is the author of his own misfortune. And he said the usual thing. As I said, and you know what he did? He's talking like I was saying in the previous video, a nasty headmaster. I suggest the Prime Minister thinks very carefully about this, warn, veiled threats and things like that. And then there was Ian Blackford, who is the person, Pat Riot will appreciate this. He's the one that Calamity calls a ball bag. And I mean, Calamity has this thing called ball bag of the week. Ball bag is a Scots word. It seems that Scots words are more appropriate than English words for this Brexit process, because the Scots are better at swearing than we are. A ball bag, B-A-W-B-A-G, is a Scots word for a nasty person, a blackguard, a crook, a disreputable person. Just like Kakani, I was talking about Kakani, a Scots word for what Boris was doing, which, again, there's no equivalent in English for it. But the Blackbird ball bag called this a humiliating defeat for the Prime Minister. Well, it wasn't, because he got his deal through. There was no humiliating defeat. It was just as soon as he got the deal through, rather than the House congratulating itself on this achievement, they folded their arms and stuck their tongue out and blew a raspberry and said, where, I'm not moving. And again, the good news is that the public is seeing this more and more and more. I mean, over the last few days, even I've seen the change. There's been a big change in public opinion when the opposition are now looking like exactly as they appear to be. He said, furthermore, it's absolutely crystal clear what should happen. It's the law of the land that the Prime Minister should go to Brussels and do as you've been instructed by Parliament. Well, he has, hasn't he? Thanks to his Kakani, thanks to his move. But again, interestingly, the courts are still putting a case through the Scottish court that's about the about what Boris has done, whether it's lawful or not, which is pretty ridiculous because basically it's a fait accompli now. And they've actually suspended their ruling on it. So, in summary, where am I now? Where was I? I think I missed a part of my notes here. But anyway, there was another video. There's been a couple more videos by Maya Tusi where he talks about he's back to his usual optimistic self, and he says that we shouldn't worry too much about the amendments. If Boris fails to win the votes and calls an election, the EU has good reasons for a short delay. And if it is a short delay, well, better than a long delay. Ideally, there'd be no delay. But if it's just a couple of weeks, then hopefully they'll be too busy focusing on getting the deal through to make a fuss or to cause any trouble. I hope not. Now, the customs union. Now, if Britain stays in the customs union, it's not the end of the world because that's essentially going to be part of the transitional process anyway. It's not going to change the withdrawal agreement, and essentially it can be eliminated within the transition process anyway. Now the second referendum. Now again, there's no real time to organise this. The pace that Boris has now achieved probably will make a second referendum redundant. Also, the government, it's up to the government to fund a second referendum, and they don't have to do it. So even if Parliament passed the amendment, it probably won't happen. Now, again, the longer transitional period, that is the 2-year after December 2020, that again can be repealed in the transitional process. So Maya Tusi thinks that the amendments are not going to cause any problems. Now, a large criticism of Boris Johnson's deal is he's just simply rehashing Theresa May's deal with one little change. To quote the Guardian said this, and indeed Kevin Logan and other feminists are saying this. Boris Johnson is a white male, and he's taking a job done by a woman, and he's claiming credit for it. He's taking Theresa May's deal. He's making just one little change, and he's saying it's his deal. That's typical of a white male patriarch. Yeah. Well, the fact of the matter is, it's true. Boris Johnson has just made a very minor change to Theresa May's deal. I was reading out the points of the actual deal. I read them out in the previous live stream. But the change he's made is the crucial one. The actual really the main thing wrong with Theresa May's deal, I say wrong, it was something that she put in there deliberately to try and sabotage Brexit. He removed the one thing that was there to sabotage Brexit. That was the Northern Ireland backstop. He moved it, he changed it. So the one little change he made essentially changed the entire deal. Because the whole problem with Theresa May's deal was that. Now, another thing, Maya is very, very convinced now that Boris would just go for a general election, get a Conservative majority in the House. Well, there's a couple of problems with that, and I've actually said so in the comments section on his videos. Will he definitely win a future general election? Because two reasons. There's two major hazards with any future general election, especially in the if it's pre-Brexit, if there's a long delay and there's a pre-Brexit, and there's one before Brexit. Firstly, there's going to be massive attempts at electoral fraud by the Labour Party. We know they've done this before. There's reason to believe they did it at Peterborough. We've seen evidence of electoral fraud in this country in the Scottish independence referendum. We know that several people were prosecuted for electoral fraud, and later on they were in charge of the polling station in Peterborough, in the Peterborough by-election, where the Brexit Party lost its possible first seat with just a single, with literally 3 figures of votes. That's going to happen everywhere, especially in marginal seats. I mean, it probably won't be a problem here. We got the biggest cut bloody Ramona heartland here in East Oxford, my constituency. So Annalisa Dodds, my MP, has absolutely nothing to worry about. But if you live in a marginal constituency, for goodness sake, get down the polling station and with a camera and just see what's going on, because there's going to be the Labour Party are going to attempt fraud. Second hazard, the Brexit Party. Boris Johnson, Nigel Farage need to get together, and it was Trump who said it best: Boris, get with Nigel. Boris, get with Nigel. It's odd that an American president has a better assessment of British politics than most British politicians do. there's going to need to be some kind of pact with the Brexit Party. The Tories and the Brexit Party need to make some kind of arrangement. It doesn't have to be a formal coalition. It could just be a non-aggression pact. That is, if you have a candidate in one seat, you won't fight. If the Tories are going to go for every seat, or if they decide to step out of a seat and let the Brexit Party go for it. But on no point should a Tory and a Brexit Party member compete for the same seat, because all that will achieve is splitting the vote and allowing the Labour and Lib Dems through the middle. And we know for a fact the Labour and Lib Dems and all the Ramonas, that's basically everyone else, it will have no qualms at all about putting their differences aside and cooperating. We saw this in Brecon and Radnorshire, where basically Plaid Cymru, Green Party, and all the Lib Dems all stood aside so that the Lib Dems could take on. They all stood aside so that Lib Dems could take on the Tories, knowing that all the Plaid Green voters would go for Lib Dem, and indeed Lib Dem then won that seat. They won that seat and took it off the Tories. So that is that's going to happen big time in any future general election, which means if Boris does not cooperate with Nigel Farage, then he's essentially surrendering. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. That's got to happen in a future general election. Otherwise, in our particular system here, first past the post, they'll just fail. They'll split the vote. They'll split the vote against the anti-Brexit alliance. The anti-Brexit alliance will win, and they'll just reverse Brexit. They'll take over the country, and that'll probably be the last general election we ever have in this country, knowing them, because they'll just run rampant. They'll just keep on marching until I'm probably going to be in a prison camp or something. Honestly, it's that bad. It's that bad. So what happens next? Well, the Prime Minister, has agreed to a revised Brexit deal with the EU, and MPs have voted to allow the government's bill to go forward to the next stage of parliamentary process, but they've rejected the timetable. Nigel Farage has withdrawn the bill. No, he's not withdrawn the bill, but he suspended it. But he says basically the withdrawal bill passed. There's going to be amendments, so we could get a deal after a short delay. We don't know. The EU is currently considering the UK's extension request. All 27 EU nations, they use the word nations at the BBC, it's actually member state, must agree to an extension. If they agree to an extension until the 31st of January next year, that will become the new date for Brexit. Oh, God. If the EU proposes a date other than this, even a short technical extension of a few days or a few weeks, the Prime Minister must approve it unless a motion is put before MPs and they decide not to pass it. Oh, Oh, God, I hope this doesn't... hopefully, I'm glad the Prime Minister has the say, because if the Parliament has to approve it, they'll just stick their tongue out and say no again, won't they? They'll say no to everything. If the EU refuses to grant the UK a delay, then Brexit will happen on the 31st of October at 21:30 GMT. Leaving without a deal means the UK would immediately exit the customs union and single market arrangements designed to make trade easier. An early general election is widely expected after the 31st of October, when Brexit is currently scheduled to happen. It's unclear, though, whether that would be later this year or early next year. If Brexit is delayed, the House of Commons might be asked again by the government to back an early general election. That requires a 2/3 majority in the House of Commons. And so far, this has not happened. It's been suggested before and not been agreed to. An alternative route would be for the government to have a short new law specifying the date of an early general election that would require only a simple majority and not need 2/3 of MPs. Oh, I didn't know they could do that. That could bypass the Fixed Term Parliament Act. There is another more dramatic way. The Prime Minister could call a vote of no confidence in his own government. Oh, that's it. So if a vote of no confidence is called, the government wins, the government presses on with plans. If it loses, is there an clear alternative government? The PM, if there is, then the PM will resign and a replacement will be appointed. If not, can any government win a confidence vote within 14 days? If yes, it's done. If no, then there's a general election. At any point, the opposition could call for a vote of no confidence in the government, and Corbyn has previously said he would table such a motion. If more MPs vote for the no confidence motion than against it, there will be a 14-day window to see if the current government or an alternative one with a new Prime Minister could win a vote of confidence. If no one does, then a general election could follow. Now, there could be another referendum. It would certainly require a Brexit delay and most likely a change of government. So basically, this could happen if there's a 3-month delay and a general election. We could end up with a second bloody referendum. And this could then be, it could have an advisory one or a confirmatory, legally binding referendum. Apparently, the one in 2016 was advisory, which is what the damn Ramonas keep on about. Experts at the Constitution University College London say it would take minimum of 22 weeks for that to happen. And the new referendum will require extra legislation to be held. There would also have to be time for the Electoral Commission to consider the question of wording, especially if it's a referendum with more than 2 options. Now, that's the good news. It's a second referendum would be much more complicated than the first one. It'd be legally binding and probably have more than 2 options. Now, 22 weeks is a long time. 22 weeks is over 5. It's over 5 months. So hopefully that'll be long enough for this whole damn business to be sorted out before they have a chance. And of course, cancelling Brexit. I said it before. I'll say it again. There's the legal option of cancelling Brexit simply by revoking Article 50. So that's possible after a change of government. But the Lib Dems have said they would, if they won a majority, they would do it. Now, that's the danger, is there'll be a general election, and because of the reasons I just said, the Conservatives the Conservatives and the pro-Brexit alliance, hypothesised, would lose. And if that happened, then the anti-Brexit alliance would win, and the anti-Brexit are quite happy to ally on this, as we've seen. And they'll simply revoke Article 50. So ideally, it'd be better if we have Brexit before a general election. But even if we do, that's not the end of it, as I've said before, for many reasons. It could be that there'll be the next general election in a post-Brexit world. The anti-Brexit alliance will then still be formed, and it will have part of its manifesto applying for re-entry to the European Union. And of course, getting back into the European Union will be far easier than getting out. I can imagine them just saying, we want to go back in, and the EU saying, yeah, come on in, open the door, straight back in. So even after Brexit, there's still going to have to be on our guard. So let's have a look at the news. Anything new? No, nothing particularly. Johnson and Corbyn meet amid Brexit uncertainty. Oh, this is the latest. Boris Johnson has met the Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn amid uncertainty over what happens next. So BBC's political editor Laura Kunsberg says she understands nothing was agreed at the meeting, which happened this morning. Okay, so let's go back to let's go through your questions. Just going to de-troll. I'm just going to go through your things and de-troll. Hello, Stephen. How are you? Paul Armstrong, greetings. I mostly talk about football. That's fine, mate. You talk about your football. I like football. Don't get me wrong. I do enjoy football. I just don't consider it as I don't see why we consider it. It's all right. It's okay. Stephen, could you've asked a question about Boris Johnson and Hillsborough? Could you repeat it, because I'm not going to answer questions unless I know what's going on. So you made some points here I'd like you to repeat. Hello, an outlaw in-law. You still don't get it. Well, please repeat that. Okay. Hello, Hunley. As I said, Miles Lawler, greetings. You need to. If you address me questions now, I'm just de-trolling at the moment. So could you please repeat your questions? Diego Rivera, hello. Hello, how are you? So where are we now? Stephen says there's probably a ghost living in my bookshelf. All right. JJD, hello. Diego Rivera. Stephen was asking me, and I did catch a glimpse of it. I mean, Stephen was saying that, and several other people were saying that I made a mistake in supporting Boris Johnson And so could you give me some more details on that? Because I don't think I have. James says, being a devoted Brussels believer, I welcome our German overlords. James, are you channeling your inner Shrimpton there? Hello, Susan. Susan Hayward-Tonkin, greetings. Fenlander, hello. Yes, I've been de-trolling. And hello, Miles Lawler. Welcome. I've been getting rid of, but there have been no trolls. Again, the trolls seem to have given up on me, which is nice. I appreciate that. That's absolutely fine. But I don't think I have made a mistake supporting Boris Johnson. I've seen several comments as I've been de-trolling with people saying, oh, they're all the same, Ben. Why do you support one side? Why do you support them? Well, this takes us back to the 2016 question. Is the 2016 effect real? And Sonia White says, why are you encouraging people to give their energy to this, Ben? Because, Sonia, I think it's something we need to give our energy to. The Brexit issue is extremely important. I don't go along with the 2016 deniers who say it's not, it's a distraction or it's meaningless or both sides are as bad as the other, etc., etc. I don't go along with that. And I've made a video you should watch if you haven't already called Why 2016 Matters. It's on my channel, so check that out. And I go into more details there. So I think this is vitally important because the outcome of Brexit, and well, the outcome, well, in a sense, the outcome's already happened, but the issue to do with Brexit is very, very important in stopping the New World Order. It could well be a major turning point in the battle against the New World Order. It really could be, because the EU is part of the New World Order agenda. It's the two-stage Stalinist model, and if the EU falls, then they're back to the drawing board, basically. And they have to have another strategy, but it took them over a century to work out this particular strategy. So it'll probably take them more than a century to work out the next one, at which time we can then expose them, make them all shapeshift in public, whatever it is, and that'll be the end of it. So that's why I'm encouraging people to give their energy to this. James says, because Mr. Ben counters an agent for the con piracy Dutch Welsh division. James, how did you know? But Stevens made a couple of comments about this, like how all politicians are bastards or something. No, not all. They used to be, but something has gone wrong since 2016, which has allowed people who are different to get into positions where people like them never would before. The perfect example is President Trump. I believe that Boris Johnson is another element of this. He's not perfect, but he's somebody I believe can do some good. And James says, two-state Stalinist model or multi-state Captain Jack Sparrow model. Oh, well, you know, James, that's a good. You remember that great series of Doctor Who with Christopher Eccleston. Oh yeah, and Captain Jack Sparrow, which was really good because that was before it all went downhill. It sort of went downhill halfway through the David Tennant era, and then Matt Smith was terrible. I never watched Peter Capaldi at all, and of course now it's gone PC and feminist, and it's just lost. Diego Rivera, can Brexit still happen on the 31st? Yes, in a word, yes, but it's for it to happen on the 31st. The EU are going to have to just reject a extension, and I think we have at least a 50-50 chance of that. It's pretty clear that the Ramonas in Parliament, who now control the Parliament, basically, are going to do everything they can to stop it happening. And if they have their way, and if the EU grants an extension, then they will have an opportunity, a window of time to make mischief, like I said. So the ideal thing is if the EU reject the extension, which I think we have at least an even chance of gaining at the present time. So the European Council rejects the extension, and then we just go WTO at Halloween. That is the ideal situation. The worst case scenario is they give us another 3 bloody months, and in that time period, the Ramonas are going to they're going to go crazy. They're going to make hay, and Boris is going to have to fight them all the way for 3 bloody months. It's going to be a nightmare. Stephen says, Boris is one of these people. I'm not buying into his act. No, Stephen, he's not. He's not. I know what he said about Hillsborough, and that's disgusting. That was a disgraceful thing he said. But he's changed. And you're wrong. And in my film, why 2060 matters, I explain why. So I think he's for real. I mean, people accuse him. I know you're not the first person, Stephen, to accuse him of acting and to put this being a big confidence trick, but it's not. I really don't think it is. I think he is. This is genuine. This is a genuine breakdown of the New World Order agenda. I swear to you, it is. Miles Lawler. So if an MP is a Remainer and their constituency is a Leave one, are they likely to be re-elected? Miles, that's virtually a rhetorical question. And you know what? I think some of them must realise this. Some of them really must understand. And this is why they've been so reluctant to hold a general election. I mean, they get emails from their constituents. A lot of the Remainer MPs have a former Labour heartlands in the north of the country, you know, where there's a lot of Leave voters. And they know they're going to be completely and utterly crashed. They're going to completely and utterly be crucified in any general election by their electorates, unless Boris and Nigel just shrug their shoulders and allow the Remainers back in again. So this is the thing, isn't it? Sonny says Brexit is a state of mind. In a way, you're right, because this fixation I have on the subject is kind of irrelevant if I take a step back. The reason it's irrelevant is because, in a sense, the victory with Brexit is not something we have to fight for. It's something we've already gained. The victory happened on June the 23rd, 2016. That was when Brexit essentially happened, because everything that's happened since then, Sonia, has been just basically has been the aftermath of that victory. So all the efforts that the Remoaners have gone to has simply been a more and more failing rearguard action on their part. So if I take a step back and I try to be less emotional about it, I shouldn't be as concerned as I am about what's going to happen with Brexit, because in a sense it's already happened, and the actions of the Remoaners they're undoing themselves. It's just compounding the victory of our side. The worst thing that could have happened, the very worst thing that could have happened after the 2016 referendum, was for everyone in government to simply shrug their shoulders and say, okay, the Leavers won, trigger Article 50 now, we're out in 2 years. And that would be the end of it. That would be the very worst thing that could have happened, because they would have escaped. Then if they'd done that, if the Remoaners had done that, they would have actually escaped intact. As it is they have destroyed themselves in their actions, because everyone is looking at this. The whole world is watching, as they used to say in the 60s. So by that definition, you are completely right. Brexit is a state of mind. Videos from the underground. You are right about Stockholm Syndrome. Freedom is scary for the victims of deceit. A country that was tricked into joining in the first place. Ted Heath, just terrible. Yeah, I mean, Ted Heath is someone who would be in jail right now if he was alive. And guess who first warned us about Ted Heath? David Icke. No one's apologising to him. No one is thanking him. But Stockholm Syndrome, it's like I said, it's like about those guys on the Burma Railway, the British POWs who refused to leave their cells when they were liberated. The medical officers had to sedate them, and they had to be carried out of their cells. So yeah, freedom is scary for people who are not only victims of deceit and abuse, but are addicted to abuse. You can be addicted to bad, unpleasant experiences. Can be as addictive as pleasant experiences. I mean, that's what Stockholm Syndrome is. It's very interesting. David Schultz. Greetings, Ben. Happy belated birthday. Thanks, David. I hope everything's all right in Maine. It was the 13th indeed, yes. Sounds like your side of the pond is in a bit of a pickle with Brexit. Yes, it's kind of like it's a pond that's boiling over right now, isn't it? Yeah. James Tilly Matthews said Ted Heath was a pioneer in the child services sector. You're being ironic now. Yes, it's the same way that King Herod was an expert in baby care. Yeah. Jago Rivera. Brexit is a satanic ritual. 39 deaths in Essex today. Some kind of human sacrifice. Yeah, what was that? Was amazing. That was. Oh, that's always a terrible thing. That's taken Brexit off the headlines, actually. A lorry driver. Yeah, there's a guy. 39 bodies found in a shipping container on the back of a lorry. It's driven by a Northern Ireland man called Mo Robinson, and he's been arrested on suspicion of murder. I suppose whether he's guilty or not will depend on whether he knew that there were people in the back of the lorry. I'm guessing that apparently these people are from Bulgaria, and I'm guessing they're illegal immigrants who are trying to get into the country. And unfortunately, as often happens, they suffocated. They suffocated in the shipping container. Apparently, the person who was the executive of the lorry company, of the driver who's been arrested, said that the container appeared to be a refrigerated unit, which was at a temperature of minus 25 degrees centigrade. What are they doing putting people? Why people, the people smugglers or the people traffickers or the refugees themselves getting into trying to escape in a refrigerated unit? Oh, those poor people, they must have been like a bunch of ice cubes. How awful. So yeah, that was a nasty business, wasn't it? So Diego Rivera, if it's some kind of satanic ritual, I mean, it's certainly taken the politics off the headlines. Sonia White says, absolute bollocks, Ben. About what, Sonia? Alien Biker says, hi, Ben. Get all the Remainers in the House of Commons on the 5th of November to debate their plans. Lol. P.S. Good live stream. Thanks, Alien. And you know, it's interesting. I mean, you've got to be careful what we say here for legal reasons, but if there is an extension past the 31st of October, it's just 5 days, isn't it? And then who knows what could happen on that day? Videos from the Underground says, another referendum, dead people voting, illegals voting, stuffing ballot boxes, cheating general, EU citizens voting. Yes. As I said, Videos from the Underground, we're going to have to be very, very careful about electoral fraud. As I was saying, I mean, I'll say more about this nearer the time, but if you're in a marginal seat, we need to do something, innit? Stephen says, Boris Karloff. Diego Rivera, do you want a full English Brexit? Yes, please, with fried Ramonas. Stephen says, Boris Karloff. James, Simon Parts must have upped his security during this trying time. I hope he can pull Brexit off. Well, you know what? He talks about Brexit a lot, and he's very encouraging. He really is. Stephen says, Boris syndrome. Is that me then? Boris syndrome. Have I got, you see, like I suppose many people could say, well, I've got Stockholm syndrome because I'm supporting an evil member of the Illuminati who's playing 5-dimensional chess, or even 6 or 7-dimensional chess, and is actually not really against, he's actually really in favor of Remain. He's just pretending to be a supporting Leave. Diego Rivera, full English Brexit, Ben, including a cup of tea. We've got to have a cup of tea. It's Britain, isn't it? James says, Boris syndrome like Turkish flu, but without the swollen glands. Yeah. Well, Boris is actually 1/4 Turkish, which is interesting. James says, Barbara Castle warned us. Barbara Castle, that's a name I haven't heard for a while. Wasn't she, what did Barbara Castle say? Diego Rivera, David Dyke has just come out as a trans woman. Who's David Dyke? I know. Were you the one who sent me stuff about John Hutchison? Because I said someone sent me some pictures of John Hutchison in drag, and I said that this is not relevant to any of the things he's done, or Dr. Judy Wood and anything she's done. But who's David Dyke? I don't know who that means. Do you mean David Duke? Luke Griffin. Everything has a beginning, everything has an end, and the EU will end, hopefully, in my lifetime. Well, Luke Griffin, as long as you live for the next 8 to 10 years, yes. The EU is, this is the thing, the EU is going to fall. A lot of people forget that the independence movements are not just in Britain. The equivalent of Brexit is everywhere. Poland has just elected a new government, which is committed to removing Poland from the EU. There's so-called populist movements in Italy, in Austria, in the Czech Republic, in Hungary, everywhere. So the EU's falling. When the EU falls, the New World Order will fall. Stephen Homeless Truth Seeker. What date was the EU born? That's a tricky one, Stephen, because the EU didn't actually occur. It didn't actually begin in any one time. The origins of the European Union came in stages, and the reason they came in stages was because they knew that people didn't want it. They knew people didn't want it, so they knew they had to bring in it slowly in separate little stages. It's what David Icke calls the stepping stones approach. If you want to say what actual date it really began, I think probably the most obvious one is probably in 1920 when Pan Europa was published. That's Richard Count von Coudenhove-Kalergi's book, which triggered the movement, the Pan Europa movement, which then resulted in the 1946 Brussels Treaty. And the Brussels Treaty was the first sort of major international legislation achieved by the movement in 1946, at the end of World War II, which then created the movement for the European communities and the common market, which was through the 1960s. That was achieved in 1973. Britain joined in 1973. Others joined earlier. There was a referendum in 1975 in retrospect, which unfortunately ratified that in the ears of the public. And of course, then you have the Maastricht Treaty, the Lisbon Treaty, and that was essentially when it started being called the European Union. And it was basically non-stop progress until Brexit, until June 2016. James Tilly Matthews, the EU will win out in the end. No, it won't. The EU is going to fall. I mean, if the Romans have their way, we just got to be patient and wait for the rest of it to collapse. And then I mean, finally, if maybe Britain's the only country left in the EU, the Ramonas will say, well, could Brexit simply be us changing our name to Great Britain? You know, hello, Hannah Loney, how are you? James says, sanity must prevail. It will. You delusionals will all be transported to re-education camps once our German overlords prevail. My goodness me. Michael Shrimpton has taken possession of the etheric body of James Tilly Matthews. Yeah. If you want to ask a question, the answer is the Germans did it. Yeah. Stephen says, what about special treatment? In what way? Maybe that you're applying to something I said earlier, so I apologize if I don't understand. James says, Icke is a flawed regurgitator at best, Mr. Seeker. Icke draws on other people's work, which he doesn't credit. And this is why I understand people like Dave Starbuck and Bill Cooper were angry with him. But I think he's still all right. David's still a good guy. He's not perfect, but he's good. James also says, Mr. Parts is the keystone of Brexit, Mr. Nephilim Jones. Mr. Parts, well, I don't know. If he can get some of his alien family to do something about it, I'll be very pleased. You know, I'll be very, very pleased indeed. So, Simon, if you're watching, ask Mrs. Manted to get on the case, please, would you? See if she could do something. I always welcome help from any quarter. Hugh Jarsol. Hello, Hugh. Welcome. Says, Ben, Boris is simply an EU double agent hoping to sabotage Brexit at the end, so there's no comeback. Right. This is not a terribly original position, Hugh, that Boris is actually really a lever. He's a Ramona in disguise, and he's playing some kind of fifth dimensional chess game with us. And everything about him, everything he said, everything he does is some kind of clever ruse to make us believe he's something other than he is. So, I mean, if he gets his way, then presumably this will be like all part of the plan too. But then I have to ask you, if everything that appears to be the New World Order in trouble is actually everything going according to the New World Order's plan, by what criteria would you accept that the New World Order was over? What would falsify your position on this? This is a question I ask everyone. Because as far as I can see, unless you can answer that question, then we might actually be in the post-Illuminati world, and you and people like you will still be peeping around corners going, my goodness, aren't they crafty? James says, Barbara Castle received a dossier on institutional abuse in the 70s. Oh, yes. I remember now, James. Brian Clare talks about this. She did indeed, and it included people such as... there was people such as who was mentioned in it? Leon Britton was mentioned in it. The big fat guy whose name I can't remember. Cyril Smith, he was mentioned in it. Ted Heath, and indeed the police at one point in 1983 gathered absolutely positive proof that Cyril Smith was involved in a child abuse ring. They caught him red-handed filming him and recording it and everything, and nothing was done about it. So I see now. I remember now what you were talking about. Barbara Castle. I was thinking, what's the name? I don't know. I know Barbara Castle. Labour. She was a Labour peer. I think she's dead now, but she was a Labour peer. Paul Armstrong. David Dyke is obviously David Icke. Oh right, okay. So David Dyke is a cross-dresser. Really? But could I see a photograph of him that's not photoshopped? Stephen says Dr. Judy's Brill. Yeah, Dr. Judy Wood is. Yes, Dr. Judy Wood is the person who solved 9/11, in my view, who explained how it really happened. Okay. Huge arsehole says Boris and McMoron, etc. all went to the Bullingdon Club together. That and Cameron. Yeah, Cameron. Yeah, Cameron. Yes, that's true. I've talked before at the Bullingdon Club in Oxford. I live in Oxford, and I tell you what, they have a terrible reputation here for trouble. And indeed, Boris, like I said before, Boris's background is suspicious. He is not Britain Trump in that respect. He's not. He doesn't have the same background as Trump, which does cause concern. However, for reasons I've explained in previous videos, Hugh, and check those out. Check the previous videos I've done on Brexit. I know there's a lot of them there, but it's in there more than once, so you'll come across it pretty soon. That, I think, is changed. Boris is not the chosen one. He was not meant to be prime minister. I really think he was not. I mean, people have said, "Oh, Boris." You know, this is important, right? People have quoted Boris said something like before the 2016 referendum campaign that said he supported the EU. He didn't. He's been misquoted, and I can't remember the details now. But he definitely was. I did look it up. David Schultz says, "I was wondering what is the voting process in the UK? Are they paper or electronic? As Joe Stalin says, it's not the people who cast the votes, it's the people who count the votes." Good question, David. And luckily, we still have good old-fashioned paper and sealed boxes, which makes voter fraud more difficult. But it is still possible to arrange electoral fraud. I believe it's been done. Do you remember the Use Pens campaign? There was the Use Pens campaign in the 2016 referendum, which of course was a bit of a joke, but it left people open to the idea of the possibility of electoral fraud, which is very important. Now, indeed, we've heard some awful situations of electoral fraud. Do you remember the Veritas project with not Ken O'Keefe, the other guy called O'Keefe, who was looking into this? The fact that the voting machines, people were pressing buttons and said vote for Trump, and they pressed it and they said Hillary selected and things like that. So the electoral fraud in Britain is more difficult, but it is not impossible. We need to be on our guard against it. It was also done in Ireland over the Lisbon Treaty. The Gardaí, the National Police Force, were turned up and they were dropping boxes of yes votes on the Lisbon Treaty in polling stations all over the country. Israel Diego Vera, do you have a lot of competition as a gardener, Ben, from EU nationals? No, I don't actually. I have. I'm only one guy really, and there are a lot of foreign people who do like my job, and I know a couple of them. But I'm not really in competition with them. I've not been sort of turned down in favour of an EU national. No, I haven't. Indeed, when I was a hospital porter, I was serving alongside people from all over the world. As I've said, hospital portering is very cosmopolitan. Stephen, but they must have had meetings. Do you mean Boris? As Boris had meetings with people? He had a meeting with Corbyn today. I mean, what do you mean? Could you be more precise? James says, 1943 Madrid, Spain. A bunch of Nazis got together there with a sanctioned academics to ignite a new Europe movement. Apparently, they weren't sure that Hitler could win, so they wanted to back up. That's interesting, James, because at the time, Spain was ruled by General Franco, and in fact, he ruled it. I think he died in the 70s. And it was only then that the elections were allowed in Spain. But Franco, I know, was an ally of Hitler. And funnily enough, Hitler had this vision for Europe. Now, Hitler called his territory the Third Reich. And but he was going to change it. The plan was to change it to originally Europäische Vereinschaft. Now, I don't know how many of you speak German. Hugo does. Hugo Rune, what does Europäische Vereinschaft mean? Tell them. Stephen says 73 was that Ted Heath, and what's the numbers on the date for that? I don't know the actual date, Stephen, but yes, Ted Heath was Prime Minister in 1973. Yeah. He was the guy who took us into the EU, basically. Diego Rivera Jr. says, I still think Brexit will happen on the 31st. I think we have a chance. As I said, we have an opportunity. I'll check, actually, before the end of the live stream on whether... I'll do it now quickly. Any news? Let's have a look. No. We just have we have an earlier thing, and that's that the EU eyes flextension. I mean, flextension, I think, is going to be the new buzzword, because they are talking about it. They're just meeting and they're talking, and we don't know how long it will be. But they say, it's funny here, they says the ball is not in our court, the balls are stuck in the UK's net. Well, that's interesting, because pretty much I see it the other way around. It's really up to the EU now. The EU are saying, we've done our part. They're frustrated. Like it or not, Brussels is now the focus of attention. They haven't done their part. They have a possibility. We know that Tusk is now... he's offering, now the withdrawal agreement's been passed, he's going to recommend that the EU accept the UK request for an extension. The thing is, now that the withdrawal bill's been passed, does that make it... I mean, suppose if it hadn't been passed, it might have made a long extension more likely. I think a short extension is now on the cards. I think we have probably the most likely is a short extension, but I do believe that we have at least an even chance of a no-deal Brexit on the 31st. I think that is a possibility. It really is a possibility. We'll know more in the future. We just don't know now. Hello, DJB2. How are you? James says, Bill Copper, another absolute unit. I don't know what that means. James says, get those gins, stroke Mr. Barnes. Yeah, if the good gins can step in, that would be great. Yes, I like the gins, especially if they got tonic in them. Diego Rivera, David Icke has written more books than the Bible. The Bible only has 2 books, the Old and New Testament. Oh, no, I see what you mean. The books of the Bible, yeah. I was going to say the Testaments, the books. That's right. He's written, I can't remember the exact figure, but The Trigger is his latest one. He has written a lot of books. James says, I refute your New World Order definition, Mr. Ben Counters. Really? Well, James, how would you define it? Stephen, no government, no control system, etc. Well, I am something of an anarchist, Stephen. I do think the best system would be without a state at all. Diego Rivera, Brexit is a Rothschild scam. It's so obvious. Well, Diego Rivera, you say this every time, and every time I explain to you why it's not. If it's so obvious, why can't I see it? Diego Rivera, Boris is a close friend of Jacob Rothschild. Oh, right. Well, again, I've heard about this. What is Rothschild's role in this? And by friend, do you mean he's a friend in the same way that President Trump is a friend of Jeffrey Epstein, which means he got a lift on his plane once, and he kicked him out of his resort. He kicked Epstein out of his resort. So did Boris kick Rothschild's out of his resort and get a lift on his plane once? Because if not, then by the definition of the media, he's a friend of Jacob Rothschild. Yes, I'll type that into Google then, shall I? So Jacob Rothschild. Yes, Jacob Rothschild, 4th Baron Rothschild. Yeah, he's the head of the. Yes, he's the head of the Freemasons. That's interesting. A good friend of the Duke of Kent. Yes, I've heard about. Yep, he's a friend of his, and he's involved in his grandfather was involved in the Balfour Agreement. Yep. Okay, I don't have time to read all this, but as I said, you have to define friendship. Does it mean he's an ally? Tony, hello. Tony McFasty, hello, Tony. I'm wearing my tinfoil hat so the New World Order Labour Party can't beam Remainer thought waves into my head. Well, Tony, I don't have that. I don't have a tinfoil hat. I have that one. I might wear my Oxford Truth Tour hat to maybe that will help. But I don't want any Remainer thoughts being beamed into my head. I've got enough trouble with my dad going on about it, and I get into arguments with my dad. Liverpool 1-0 up, says DJ B2. Well done, Liverpool. And we have 50 people watching, says Stephen. We've got 54 now, so welcome all new people who are watching. Okay, someone called Jawesh has just written something in Arabic, which I'm now going to run through translate. As I said, I've got to limit the amount of foreign dialogue in that is posted, because the reason is, I'll keep Google Translate open actually. But the reason is, it could be something which is either abusive, rude, trolling. We had people writing in Belarusian and Italian the other day. Oh, what's this? Right, detect language, Arabic, and it is right. Hamed says, Hamed, good. Hello, good evening. Oh, is that all right? That's all right. Hello to you too, Jawesh. Do you speak English? It's easier if you can speak English. It'd be easier for you to do so. And Jawesh says something else here. If you can speak English, it'd be enormous help, Jawesh, actually. Right, here we go. Paste. Let me just delete that. Mohammed Jawesh, hello. Okay, is that your full name, Mohammed Jawesh? Hello, Mohammed Jawesh. Greetings. Thanks for joining this live stream. Hugh Jasso. I've just got the joke in your name, Hugh Jasso. I've just got the name, the joke. Who advises Boris and who advises them? Well, Boris gets advice from all kinds of people, but he's gone against that advice. That's the thing. Videos from the underground says Boris, whatever looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, sounds like a duck, probably is a duck. Boris can go down in history as a hero if he plays the game and gets you out of the EUSSR. That's a good point, videos, because again, you've got to ask people if there's this kind of element within the truth movement that everything is fixed, everything is bent, everything is going exactly the way the New World Order want. And if it appears that it's not, there's just a deeper part of their plan. Everything, absolutely everything, is part of their plan, which means that if things that go against them, things that individuals who, like myself, who speak out against them, are really speaking for the New World Order. We're actually just shills. All of us are shills. And we're just speaking for the New World Order. We're doing it in such a crafty way that people can't see it. Which basically means effectively the New World Order can never be seen to end, no matter what happens. And every single person who speaks out against it is simply speaking for it. It's a ridiculous, unfalsifiable hypothesis. It's an ad hominem. It's nonsense, which is why I made my tribunal video. If you haven't seen it, please do watch my tribunal video. Susan said, I did polling booths for years and stayed for their scrutineering. My point is I could see how a paper vote can be manipulated, especially when preferences are given. Now, I know in Australia you've got a different system, Susan. I know that you actually have a legal obligation to vote. You have to cast your vote. You can spoil the ballot if you want, but you have to cast your vote. And, people laugh about it. I mean, in 2016, there were all kinds of jokes. There was that comedy sketch of James Bond is sitting by the swimming pool with a vodka martini with some bikini birds around him. And he's got a pencil and a rubber, and he's like taking voting slips and rubbing out the yes and putting no, and rubbing out the leaves and putting stay in, get another one, rub it out, put stay, and things like that. So people take the piss out of it a lot. But it is actually a serious matter. And if it can happen in Britain, it can happen in Australia. It can happen anywhere, in any democratic country on earth, where they use paper ballots or indeed any other form of ballots. So, yeah. Even in the mother of all parliaments, Britain. I mean, this is the thing. There are international bodies to monitor elections proposed by the United Nations. And they do go into various countries, usually new democracies, just to make sure to give international supervision on various elections and how they are progressing. Because there's all kinds of electoral fraud. I mean, some countries declare themselves democratic republics after years of dictatorship. And they hold elections, and then when the ballot slips are finally presented, there's only one name on it, and the name on it is the is the dictator. So you can vote for the dictator or spoil your ballot. And if you spoil your ballot, then the secret police come knocking on your door late at night, and you get dragged away and never seen again. So but the thing is, no one ever thinks that's necessary in Britain. Nobody ever suspects good old Britain, good old mother of parliaments, goddess of democracy crap, that anything like could happen in the oldest democracy on earth, which is apart from Venice and that, which is Venice doesn't exist anymore. But Britain is the oldest modern democracy on earth, I think. So that's the problem. And the thing is, we have the Electoral Commission here, but it's basically the Electoral Commission is essentially the criminals policing it's essentially the cons policing the jail. It's not really up to it anyway. Huge arsehole says gets 50p per comment from Juncker. Genius does. In that case, if Diego Rivera got 50p from Juncker every time he made a comment, he'd have been a millionaire 5 years ago, I'll tell you. Luke Griffin, nobody rules if nobody obeys. Exactly. What if they had a war and no one turned up? Things like that. Stephen, who's the head of the Bank of England these days? I'll just check. I think it's not Carney anymore, is it? I think it was Carney. I just won't use Wikipedia, I'll use Google. It was James Carney, head of the Bank of England. It's Mark Carney. That's Mark Carney. Yes, it is. Right. Diego Rivera, UK and US created the EU. Fact. The New World Order. It was a New World Order agenda created by all kinds of people. I mean, Richard Count von Huhnhoff-Kalergi, of course, was the instigator of the Pan-European movement. But I mean, it's an old idea that goes back to Joseph Stalin, as I've said, and you could trace it back to people like John Ruskin, Karl Marx, and various other people who talked about continental superstates and things like that. Diego Rivera, Churchill was one of the main proponents of the EU. Was he? Doesn't surprise me there, Diego. And of course, Boris Johnson wants to be compared to Churchill. He's even written a book about Churchill, but I don't think he should. I think Vanier Traditionalist says, give the video a like if you haven't. Oh, thanks, Vanier. Thank you very much. James says, I wouldn't define NWO at all. Power is proactively reactive. Yes, groupings have plans, but none are in Georgia stones, so to speak. You mean like the Georgia Guidestones? So power is proactively reactive. I'm not sure what that means. Groupings have plans, but none aren't. Like, I suppose you mean like in complete control. This was Robert Anton Wilson's line. Now, Robert Anton Wilson has been blamed for a lot of modern conspiracy culture. And I think I love the guy. I think he's great. I love his writings. I love his talks. But really, I mean, he was satirizing a lot of it. A lot of it was meant to be taking the mickey, so to speak. However, of course, there are factions within the New World Order. They don't agree on everything. We're witnessing a massive split between the British elite and the European elite about how to handle Brexit, which I talked about before. So Robert Smith says, have you seen the new NATO HQ in Brussels? No, I'll just Google it. Is the NATO HQ in Brussels? Let's have a look. It is, yes. NATO HQ Brussels. NATO headquarters, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, is a complex in Haren in Brussels. And let's have a look at it. I'll go to images. Have I seen it? Let's go to images and see what it looks like. Bloody hell! It looks like a kind of. It looks like a kind of tuning fork or something, or. Oh my goodness! It looks like a mask or one of these like masks or a set of claws. It's a weird-looking thing. It's a very weird-looking thing indeed. Yeah. Where are we now? JTM says, besides, what Pope wants 500,000 worshippers when he can have a couple of billion? Well, exactly. Well, he does, doesn't he? It's like, Okay, Chawesh, if you can speak English, so why don't you? It just make it easier for me if you can speak English, mate. It really would. Because I do have to check foreign text. And we had Belarusians and Italians and people like that. Free membership? Free membership of what? What are you talking about? No Anglers 1,000. I don't know what you're talking about there. Someone says blatant misrepresentation. Mr. Ben Counters, says James T. Matthews. I don't know what you mean by that, James. Ryan Bennett says, I like eating cereal. Does that make me a serial killer? Hello, Ryan. Hi, Ryan. Good opening comment, mate. James says, no, you are denigrating an alternative viewpoint with your own unfalsifiable position. In what way is my position unfalsifiable? My position is completely falsifiable. I said this in my live stream when Boris first became Prime Minister. I said we need to watch and see what he does. There's a certain tests we can apply to him as the Brexit process comes along. There's certain tests we can apply for his sincerity. So far, he has passed those tests. I said what those criteria would be in that particular live stream several months ago. And if he had failed those tests, I would be the first person to call him out on it. And he hasn't. So it's not unfalsifiable at all, this position. Diego also says, Boris Johnson gave an Illuminati speech at the EU talking about AI and human immortality. Now, Diego Rivera, I'm sure if you're watching Juncker, that's got to be worth at least £1, isn't it? You've got to double his fees for that one. Yes, he did. This is very interesting, Diego Rivera, but he talks about 5G. He mentioned 5G. But the thing about it is, the very fact that he talked about it, in my view, makes him more likely to be a good guy. That's the interesting thing, isn't it? I think it makes him more likely to be a good guy. It's because he was alerting people. It was like Ronald Reagan's talking about how quickly our differences would be put aside. I mean, Ronald Reagan actually wasn't such a bad guy, I don't think. He was a bit, obviously he was slightly senile and he couldn't do very much, but he had but he was a good sort of like, I think he understood enough to understood that there was some good guys behind him. The people we now think are behind Trump, like the QAnon people and that like that. Stephen says, what like EU spies, Ben? There are a few of them afoot. Well, I'm sure the whole bloody parliament is full of EU spies. I mean, some of them are openly, they're not so much spies because they're deliberately going behind the backs of the government to the EU. These elected members of parliament to the Westminster Parliament, they shouldn't be allowed to do that. John Bercow, the Speaker, is the worst offender. But I'm sure there are some doing it secretly. I'm absolutely certain of that. Diego Rivera, the English have always been slaves of their ruling elite. That's not even English. Unfortunately, yes. However, that is changing. That is changing now. James says, voting is fundamentally fraudulent. The whole system is predicated on a well-educated and well-informed population. We have neither. Unfortunately, that's a good point. That is one of the weaknesses of democracy. There's that democracy only works as a fair system if the electorate are informed and willing to take action, which means they basically have to have a brain in their heads and a pair of balls in their trousers. And we've seen among the political classes and among the general population, unfortunately, the population are very easy to frighten and mislead, which is a problem, which is a real problem. Yeah. DJ B2 says, Mark Carney's putting soy in the new £5, £10 and £20 notes. It's funny, because people were saying that there's like chemicals in them, and vegetarians were saying they wouldn't use them. There is a new £20 note coming out. We've got the 5s and 10s, the 20s coming out, isn't it? Robert Smith says, from above it looks like the SS symbol. Is it the new £20 note? Let's have a look. New £20 note coming out in 2020. Let's have a look at it. Yeah, it's there's one side of it has I think that's Oscar Wilde. That's only one side. What on the other side? The other side is the Queen. Bank of England £20 note. What's the other side? Oh. The other side is like there's lots of pictures of the old ones. The other side is going to have I think it's going to be the same by the look of things. I'm not sure. Maybe it hasn't been decided yet. I don't know. Anyway, so where were we? Flipped again. Robert Smith, does it SS? I didn't see that myself, the SS symbol, but I'll look at it again later. David Schultz, Ben, a worthwhile watch on YouTube. First responders urge 9/11 investigation. September 11 press conference by A&E 9/11 Truth. I will check those out, David. Thank you. I know some of the first responders have been very, very encouraging. Some of the firemen and people like that. A&E 9/11 Truth. I don't trust architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth as an organisation. They're much too unwilling to accept Dr. Judy Wood's work. In fact, they've dismissed it in favour of fantasies about, explosives and thermite being rigged and things like that. So I don't like them. I don't trust. However, I do really respect the first responders for coming out and attending the press conference. I really do. Diego Rivera, Boris Johnson is related to the Queen and represents the Rothschilds' agenda. He is related to the Queen, but in what way does he? If the Rothschilds' agenda is what is the Rothschilds' agenda Brexit, or is the Rothschilds' agenda EU? Because he's clearly representing Brexit. If so, is the Rothschilds' agenda Brexit? If so, why is it? If he's not, and he's really playing 5-dimensional, 6-dimensional chess, and he's supporting Remain, then by what criteria could that ever be disproved? How can Boris Johnson prove himself innocent? This is why we need this tribunal system that I proposed. James says, how does geopolitical priorities of a centralized superstate or conglomeration of like-minded independent states differ? Because there's no political federation in the conglomeration of independent states. I think, do you mean like bonded or binded? I don't know what you mean. But if you're talking about like a loose alliance, it's very different from a federation. A loose alliance of states on a particular point retain independence. For example, NATO is simply a defense pact. It doesn't involve any kind of control, universal overall control. It's simply a unified command in the event of war. Huge Arsehole says, wonder if they'll start a war with Iran in time to sabotage Brexit. They'll do something. They may well do something like that, I mean, do you see Ula Damagard the other day? Someone posted this on Facebook. Who was it? I think it might have been a friend of mine on Facebook. Somebody posted this. Who was it? Someone was talking about Ula Damagard. And that was maybe... He's just done a thing about how a false flag terrorist attack is due. And it could be something like that, Hugh. It could be something related to that. It really, really could. David Schultz says, another worthwhile watch, Jeffrey Epstein's Suicide, Cellmate and Prison Gang Assassinations by Sean Atwood. I'll check it out. I will do, David. Thanks very much. Now, the whole thing with Epstein is about his cellmate, is apparently some big thug. He, according to the diagram of the prison, all the prisoners have their own cells, which you'd expect in a high security prison like that. But of course, that wouldn't stop him being suicided, would it? Joesh, I'm afraid I'm going to have to remove your comment there. I don't have time to keep translating your work. You can speak English. I've seen you do it, so could you please do so? Hugh says, our new polymer £20 note is coming out on the 20th of February 2020. It features the artist J.M.W. Turner. All right, the famous artist. Yeah, that's right. So thank you very much, Hugh. As soon as I get one of them, I'll examine it and see if there's any microchips in it and things like that. Stephen said, are you a veggie if you eat fish? Because some people think they are. Yeah, there's some people who are vegetarians who eat fish. I don't quite understand the difference. There are vegans as well who won't eat dairy produce. I'm not sure. James says, well, they need to reach a casino sometime soon, Mr. Jartle. They're screwed the industrial, economic and cultural poots. That's the £20 note, yeah. James says, are these restarts and these restarts are usually instigated by the large complex? Yes, exactly. With the large conflict, something would happen. I would be surprised if sometime in the next week to a few weeks, a senior member of the royal family is going to die. Maybe even the Queen herself. Now, I suspect that Prince Philip is already dead. You watch my film about Prince Philip's car crash? That in itself is suspicious. I think he's probably dead. But they're going to wait for the right moment to announce it. It will probably be sometime soon, just to take people's attention away from Brexit, maybe to suspend Parliament, things like that. Stephen says, Gage, Jones, Fetcher, etc. cover up 9/11. Unfortunately, yes, they do. They are They are involved in promoting a false alternative narrative of 9/11, which is that the buildings were rigged with explosives, thermite, stuff like that, and that is causing confusion and is going to drive people back to the official story. That's what it's for. Whether they know it or not, these people are spreading false narratives. And Andrew Johnson's talks a lot about this, and he's correct. I don't agree with Andrew on everything, but he's right about this. Diego Rivera says it's to protect the city of London that does not pay tax. Oh, yes, you've been watching Rich Planet, haven't you? I don't think there's any way that something like this can be like an agenda like the New World Order could possibly in any way supersede a bunch of bankers who are looking for a tax haven. I really don't think it does. And I know that Richard has talked about this and he's put forward this proposal, and I don't think it holds water, and I've explained why in other videos. Maybe I should do a special video about that because I didn't explain it in an awful lot of detail. James says, political federation or loose alliance doesn't change the priority of states or nations involved. Is that so, James? Well, you go to Texas and tell them to disobey the government in Washington on some fundamental issue. Because the last time that happened, there was a terrible war, the worst war ever fought in North America, and 1 million people died. And that was the rise of the Confederacy and the American Civil War. And tell me that it doesn't change the priority of states or the nations involved. It does. A federation essentially is a surrender of national sovereignty. And that's what we have done. That's what the European Union is. JJDA says, Boris seemingly doing all he can to deliver Brexit, yet more than happy to have the nation's currency issued with interest. Interesting. Oh, yeah, JJ, what you were pointing out here is that Boris is not, he is not knocking over every single skittle with the same ball. I'm quite happy to accept that. I own the fact that Boris is not, he's not me, he's not David Icke. He's doing the right thing now as regards Brexit, but I have no particular belief that he will then continue down the road he's going now. I say the same thing as it's about Vladimir Putin and people like that. He's a white hat, but white hats are not anti-New World Order right down the line. There's no reason why I don't expect President Trump to suddenly start holding up copies of Where Did the Towers Go and saying the moon landings were fake. He's not. These are skittles that have to be knocked over one at a time, and these guys might not be the one to do it. It's possibly he knows about these things, but is not focusing on that now. DJ B2 says, yes, Uli said like 5 cities might have events. Yeah. DJ, what Uli is doing is actually really, really good, because I'm sure Nick, I don't know if Nick Collestrom's watching, but if he is, I mean, I need to talk to him actually about this, because it's statements like this that can prevent these attacks happening. I believe that people talking out about it, primarily Rick Clay, Ian R. Crane, and a couple of others, prevented the false flag attack that was going to happen at the London Olympics in 2012. It was going to happen. It was aborted. I really do think that. I was actually the first person to interview Ian R. Crane after the 2012 Olympics, and we had a long discussion about this. If you go to Hapanmo Radio, you'll see the things I'm talking about. Diego Rivera, Occam's razor says Brexit is part of the New World Order. Occam's razor. Now, you've been watching my skeptic video, haven't you? Occam's razor said the most likely outcome is the one that's usually correct. But as I've said, there's problems with Occam's razor. It only works within known systems. For example, if your portable radio breaks down, it's worth changing the batteries first before opening it up with a screwdriver and fiddling with the innards. The problem is with the New World Order, we're dealing with an unknown quantity, an unknown system. Now, I think it's actually far more likely that Brexit is not a part of the New World Order, because the European project, and indeed the international superstate project, the Stalinist two-stage model, is so central to this drive for the New World Order. I mean, look at the amount of effort that has gone in to creating the European Union and keeping it there. They got rid of Margaret Thatcher, the Iron Lady, for this very same reason, because she was going to become basically what we'd call today a Brexiteer. So they got rid of her. So this is why Brexit is so important, because it represents a significant breakdown of that agenda. And Occam's razor said, in my view, that's far more likely. James says, Mr. DA, they're shorting the economy. They're all a bunch of grifters. Well, I'm not so sure. I really am not. JJ puts a load of pound signs. JJ, it's all about the bucks, kids. The rest is just conversation. Well, JJ, of course, economy is central to this. It's not. The rest is not just. It's just conversation. But the economic side of things is primarily, yeah. Woden says, I didn't know Turner was gay. The painter, is he gay? I don't know. Is he? I don't know. Does it matter? Peter Steins, hi guys, hi Ben. Hello Peter, how are you? Welcome. Stephen says, Dispatches has done a program on Prince Andrew. Has he? I'll have to see that. Jay Guevara, can you give me any examples of buildings being demolished by energy weapons other than 9/11? Yes, the Murrah building. There's evidence there that suggests that there was some justification in Oklahoma City. Yeah. Hughes says, interesting how Putin accepts and admires Henry Kissinger, just like all the other leaders seem to be scared of Kissinger. All right. What has he actually said about Henry Kissinger? What if he actually says that? Peter says the screen picture is black, no image. Is it? I'll just check that, mate. I'll just check it. Let's just double check. Let's have a look. Oh, it's just waiting for the video to come up. Let's have a look. It's working all right on my end. Peter, it seems to be working at my end, and no one else is reporting it. It could be a problem with your monitor or with your browser. Try refreshing. Diego Rivera, Building 7 looks like a classic demolition, and there are millions of examples of similar demolitions. It does look very much like a demolition, like a controlled demolition. I mean, there's reason I think it was done using the Hutchison effect again, just like the Towers 1 and 2 were. But one thing's certain, it wasn't office fires that did it. Definitely not. Stephen, Building 7 was also due. Yes, Stephen has just answered the same question I have. Woden 20 says the EU agenda is to create, for some reason I had to approve that question, to create mixed race, low IQ slaves. Woden, in fact, Kalergi talked about the need to create new racial groups, which were basically mixtures. They were basically interracial groups of people. However, the low IQ slaves, I don't believe, will be any existing race we see in the world today, or even a mixture of the natural human races. They will be genetically modified. They will be rather like the Epsilons in Brave New World. If you ever read Brave New World, well, if you haven't, bloody go and read it, because that and 1984 are the two books which basically are the prophets of the New World Order, prophecies of the New World Order, written by people who knew the New World Order was coming. Huxley was Orwell's school teacher. Both were connected to the Fabian Society. The low IQ, Brave New World talks about a situation where all people are genetically modified. There are the alphas who are the top. They're genetically modified to be brilliant and superior, but the simple jobs are all done by epsilons, who are in a sense they're basically subhuman monsters with very, very low intelligence that only live for 20 years. That, I think, is the model we're talking about now. They don't really want to keep any of the existing human genetics in circulation, either as pure racial groups or mixed race groups. So Kalergi, I think, was I think he foresaw a certain change in the biology of the people, but he didn't. Maybe he wasn't initiated highly enough to know what was actually going on. Diego Rivera, so are you saying energy weapon did Oklahoma where bombs were found? You have to do better than that. Diego, I don't have the information to hand. If I'm wrong on this, I apologize, but I know for certain that the fuel fertilizer device in the Ryder truck didn't do it. That would have just done superficial damage to the building. It wouldn't have brought half of it down. Maybe if it was bombs, it was bombs. In which case, I can't think of another building that was done by Dew. I think the due was done on the World Trade Center, buildings 1, 2, and 7. John Nolan, hello, John. How are you, Ben? It's the Jones. My goodness me, Michael Shrimpton. If you're going to come into this chat box, just tell me who you are. Don't pretend to be other people. Sonia White says the Grey Scrubbers. Are you talking about the Epsilons? Yeah, you've read that book. It's a bloody interesting book. Hugh says mixed race people are low IQ. Lol. No, mixed race people are not necessarily low IQ. IQ varies among people from humans between, I think, the 60s to the 150s or something like that. There are differences in average IQ from different racial groups. I mean, there's a very controversial book called The Bell Curve that was written about that. And of course, the two authors were denounced as evil, racist, Nazis, misogynists, etc., as you do when you write a controversial book. But it actually doesn't claim that people, for example, it doesn't claim that people of a certain race are all morons and all stupid, because they're not. It's talking about average IQs. Wherever an average appears, suppose it's like 95 within a group of people within a racial or national group, it varies at least 40 points on either side, which means if you're in a group where the average is 95, you're going to get a large number of people. They said that there were roughly 100,000 people in that particular example. Within a group of like 18 million, there'll be 100,000 people with an IQ over 120. So on no account were the authors of the Bell Curve claiming what their critics were claiming they were saying. They were racist, saying that all non-white people are foolish and stupid and things like that. They weren't claiming that at all. Stephen said, I've been fighting for this 12 years. Go back and watch the latest Dr. Judy Wood stuff, and she shows how 7 was destroyed. Stephen, it was you who gave me this. I've still got it. I've watched it several times, and I've got a couple of other copies actually. I use it to put over my dragon juice just to stop it from drying up. But I remember you gave me this in Liverpool. I remember we met at the Stephen exists actually. I've met him. I know him. Yes, so Stephen and I met at a conference in Liverpool a number of years ago. I think it was in 2008. And we've met several times since then, and he gave me that. Yeah. James says there's nothing quite like the sound of Germans screaming. If ever I was invited onto Desert Island Disc, that would be my first track of choice. James, you are Michael Shrimpton, aren't you? Huge asshole says Ramona's about as low IQ people you're talking about. Well, unfortunately, when I see them waving their stupid starry flag and going, "Oh, Brexit is racism," I have to think you've got a point. Diego Rivera, Occam's razor says that they were demolished, as there are millions of examples of demolition, 0 known examples of energy weapons demolishing buildings. No, Diego Rivera, because if that was the case, then you've got to ask yourself some questions. Again, we're using Occam's razor. If there's no rubble, was it a controlled demolition, or very little rubble? About roughly less than 20% of the amount of rubble you'd expect. And if there are many other things in Dr. Judy Wood's book and in her works which describe what she's talking about, so Occam's razor says it's more likely she's right, isn't it? Video says. Without a DNA boost from the ETs, nothing's going to change about humans. Same mistakes repeated through history. Maybe videos, that is what the hybridization project is all about. And Sonia says underneath here, hybrid vigor. James says, exactly, Mr. Underground. I think that videos. That's why you must go fund me a Simon Part. Does Mr. Parts know you think like this, James? Have you told him? Diego Vera, Occam's razor says the English Bigfoot does not exist. Now, that is a trickier one, Diego. I mean, I do think that the English Bigfoot does exist. I've explained why. However, it's still a difficult one. I mean, I've looked at both sides in this, and I think the existence cryptid theory does win out, but the non-cryptid theories, it's hard to knock down all their points, I must admit. People like Glenn Vaudrey and that, it's hard to explain everything they propose. Video says, check out Ted Gunderson's testimony on the Oklahoma City bombing. He was persecuted by the FBI after he rejected them. Yeah, he wasn't just persecuted for that reason. He was also persecuted. Ted Gunderson was persecuted by the FBI primarily for his work on the kindercare home where there was institutional abuse going on. However, I'm sure that his opinion on the Oklahoma City bombing didn't help his case at all. He was treated pretty much like I was, actually. It's a pretty similar situation. Hugh Jarsell says, I know. All right, okay. Hugh says, what are epsilons in Brave New World? Bred to be unintelligent. Did you hear something? I thought, okay. What are epsilons in Brave New World? Bred to be unintelligent, the world state produces 5 distinct social classes named from the letters of the Greek script. That's correct. Alpha, beta, gamma, delta, epsilon. The deltas are kind of like in the middle. They're normal people, and the deltas and gammas, and the betas and alphas are the superior ones, and the epsilons are the lowest of the low. The deltas do sort of things like what you call skilled working class jobs. I mean, there's one scene where a delta is like running is a lift engineer in one of the scenes in the book. There's a delta who's the lift engineer. But the epsilons, of course, they just basically empty the bins and sweep the roads. James Tilly Matthews said, where are we? English white people lost an empire. That's pretty stupid. Why was that? Why was that? That was one I had to approve, which was a bit weird. I don't get that at all. Woden20 says, TV adverts promote race mixing, 100 IQ plus 60 IQ equals 80. I don't think it does. You do see that, actually. It's true that you do get like mixed, a lot of people, for politically correct reasons, you can't have too many white people and things like that. And that annoys me, Woden. It really does. I think it's done for cultural Marxist mind control reasons rather than biological engineering reasons. Now, in terms of mixing high IQ, low IQ couples, firstly, as I've already said, the differences of IQ are only average. They are not universal across the entire group. So there's no guarantee, for example, in a mixed race relationship that you would get a more or less intelligent child. There's no guarantee of that at all, because the individuals might be maybe a percentile or more above the average. Secondly, I don't, as I said before, I believe that the agenda is not actually the future for the biological nature of the human race in the future lies outside conventional ideas of eugenics or dysgenics. We're talking here about sophisticated genetic engineering and cyborgs and things like that. As Jam Noise 72 said in her short story, and I don't know if she's actually published that, actually, Jam Noise. Because she sent me a chapter from a really good book she was writing. But it's basically the character, the epsilon-like character in her story is exactly the kind of thing they've got envisioned for us. So, you know, when you produce a child, it's not like just mixing paint. It's more like picking balls out of a bag, multicolored balls out of a bag. As Richard Dawkins, one of the few right things he said. So I don't think that the TV adverts you're talking about are more about cultural and psychological manipulation rather than biological manipulation. That's what I'm saying here. Hugh Jarsell says, alphas and betas are society's elite, while gammas, deltas, and epsilons make up the working class. Epsilons are conditioned before birth to be the lowest class worker. Correct. They're conditioned through it's called hypnopedia, which is where they basically manipulate babies, even at a very young age. They put them in creches and they manipulate them. For example, they condition them to they subject them to pain if they approach a certain thing like they don't want them to talk about. They put like they give them an electric shock or deafen them with a very loud noise to associate something with pain, so they avoid it. Or they hang if they're going to be like working in space on space rockets, they hang them upside down to get them used to different gravitational fields. It's a horrible form of child abuse, but that's what they do at the hatchery, as they call it. Diego Vera, Dr. Judy Wood's book contains no science. The book is based on opinion. No, the book contains nothing but science. Diego Vera, it is. If you think Dr. Judy Wood is wrong, explain why. But you're just making a statement here. It's not based on opinion. It's not a theory. It's an explanation. And Stephen gives him a good laugh there. DJ says, was that the Beyond Knowledge conference? I was there, lol. It was rained halfway through Michael Desari's talk on Sunday, and the glass roof was a bad idea. Yeah, you were there too, DJ. Oh, yes. He went on for over 3 hours. I remember people. Unfortunately, he lost the audience a bit, and people walked out. But I remember it well. We were being dripped. It was drip, drip, drip. I remember. I won on the top of my head. I had drips on the top of my head. It was like Chinese water torture. I think that's why people walked out. I don't think it was to do with Michael himself. He's a very interesting chap. And Stephen, yes, you were there. I remember. David Schultz, what's your take of the Julian Assange denied the extradition to the USA, and what is Belmarsh prison like? Right, I've only just looked at this. Julian Assange was in court the other day, and he was in a really bad way. He was in a terrible state. I'm just have a look at him. Let me just have a look at him a minute. Hang on, Julian Assange. Yeah. Extradition hearing. Here we go. Because he's in jail. Julian Assange, judge refuses to delay extradition hearing. So the judge in London has rejected Julian Assange's attempts to delay his US extradition hearing. Yeah. His lawyers asked for more time to gather evidence, but the judge, Vanessa Bararista, says that the full hearing will begin in February. And he's in jail now. He got like a year in jail, I remember. He says Assange mumbled and paused as he gave his own name and date of birth in court. Now, according to what people have said, he's looking terrible. He's looking in an absolutely terrible state. He's looking ill. He's looking half awake. He's only 40. He's 48 years old, but he looks about 78. He's in a terrible. He's physically and mentally. He's looking in a bad way. It's possibly he was drugged or something. I don't know before he was taken. Now, Belmarsh prison is, I don't know what it's like. I've never been here. I've never been to jail, believe it or not. I'm sure I will at some point, but I've actually never been to jail. I was arrested and detained in police custody. I was locked up in a police cell a few weeks ago, as you know, if you're a regular viewer. But I was released without charge, and nothing. I've never heard anything more about it. It's a Category A men's prison in Thamesmead, South East London. Built on the east side of, here we go, blah, blah, blah. It's called the British version of Guantanamo Bay because of the Anti-Terrorism, Crime and Security Act provisions there. Yeah, the prison today. Notable inmates, Abu Hamza, Jeffrey Archer, Anjem Chowdhury, Julian Assange, of course. Jonathan King, he's a nonce, I remember him. Tommy Robinson was in there too. Oh, yeah, of course. At one point, I remember they apparently Julian Assange and Tommy Robinson met and spoke to each other, and I'd love to have known what they were talking about. I really would. But I mean, obviously, I wish him all the best, David. I really do. I mean, it's awful the way he's been treated. I don't go along with this idea that he's a shill as well. He's a shill too. Chelsea Manning, Edward Snowden. They're all shills. I know they're shills because everything, the New World Order have their way on everything. So they're all shills. Yeah. No, I don't go along with that idea either. And so I hope he's all right. I really do. I'll probably may cover that again close to the time. DJ still got his ticket from Beyond Knowledge. Oh, that's good. I used to keep my tickets for the David Icke shows, and I've still got them somewhere. James says, as a 12th dimensional alpha walk-in, who's living a third-dimensional epsilon life, I'd like us to organise one of those parties where we all come wearing nothing at all. Well, that sounds very nice. If you can get, I won't name them, but if you can get some of the ladies I was talking about in my MGTOW video, if you can get them to come along as well, that would be very nice, James. So I hope you can. And you're not just what you say you are, 12th dimensional alpha walk-in living a third-dimensional epsilon life. You've also been possessed by the etheric body of Michael Shrimpton too. That's quite something, yeah. James says, Ted Gunderson married Anton LaVey's wife. Did he? Oh, that's interesting. Where is it? I think I've flipped down again, haven't I? Diego Vera, full English Brexit for the English Bigfoot. I'm sure that they love that. I might take one into the woods and set it up on a table. DJ B2, the old police station was a weird choice of venue. DJ, it was all right, but it was a bit, as you mentioned, the roof leaked on Sunday. It was a bit rudimentary, wasn't it? Yeah, it wasn't ideal. I mean, I prefer the The arts, was it the the arts centre, which was where it was the second one was held. They held the Exapol conference there one year as well. Stephen said there were ghosts in there. Oh, nice. Diego Rivera, Viking scientist claims NASA found life on Mars in the 70s. Today, NASA says within 2 years, life will be found on Mars. Oh, they found life there. I mean, look at the data, which is publicly available. If you analyze it properly, you'll find they found life. Yeah, indeed, they did some experiments in the 70s with the Viking landers, and they proved there was something consuming the soil, the nutrients in the soil. But there's been other things that appeared, like Raoul Joseph, the guy who's been suing NASA over the crinoids and the things that move. Rich Planet has covered this. There's life on Mars. And there used to be much more. Mars used to be Earth-like in the distant past. It had oceans, and it had a thick atmosphere, and it was an awful lot warmer there. Who do you think built the face on Mars, then? Who built the Cydonia complex? If Mars has always been the way it is, then who built those things? Huge Arsehole says, what would happen if you mixed a Ramona with a lever, IQ-wise? Would it be a Romanian? Very good. I've got to remember that one, man. I've got to remember our Christmas party. I've got to bring this up. When people are fed up with the jokes and the crackers and they finish groaning, I'll bring that one up. That's good. You get a reliever, Mr. Soul, says James. English Brexit without fried Heath tomatoes and a full ration of Boris beans. Sounds lovely videos. Bucksy, hello. I remembered it, but I listened to something that explored the idea of the environment and IQ are strongly linked in terms of selection factors rather than innate properties of localized populations. Someone said something about the Ice Age raised human intelligence an awful lot, so that when the Ice Age was over, we could start agriculture. I can't remember who it was. I think it was Richard Rudgley. He's the guy who did this rather not very good TV series, but he's written a book that I read once. It was very interesting. But Richard Rudgley he's like a very avant-garde kind of paleontologist or sociologist. I think he's an anthropologist. Susan says, I'm getting really fed up with movies where the mother gets killed. It seems every movie that I see has this in it. It seems to be one of those cultural conditionings. Yeah, can you give me some examples? Because I know it does happen, doesn't it? I mean, in Bambi, and it happens in fairy tales as well. So anyway, Nothing says, I was hopeful you were still alive. I am. I'm glad. So I'm sorry I didn't do the live streams beforehand. Hugh says that RT posted a video of Assange in the van looking drugged. From what I've heard, he was not himself. He really looked in a bad way. Diego Rivera says, Occam's razor says Planet X is a brown dwarf, as 85% of stars are binary systems, and the sun has no visible binary. 1 in 6 stars have brown dwarfs. The thing is, Diego Rivera, it's perfectly possible, but obviously it's nowhere near it's in the inner orbit of the solar system at the moment. Otherwise, we'd see it. That's the thing. Sonia says it's terrible what they're doing to Julian Assange. Yes, it is. The guy's a hero. I don't believe he's a shill and all things like that. I mean, I've covered this in detail to explain that the shill theorists of Julian Assange got it wrong, and I've explained why. The things like, why is he not talking about UFOs? Why is he not talking about 9/11? Well, I can explain that. James says, Tsarian, another tarot tickling Blavatsky boom. I think that's very rude. I don't think you should talk about me like that. Diego Rivera says, Judy Wood's book has never been peer-reviewed. Well, of course not, Diego Rivera. If you mean peer-reviewed, that someone has written about it in Nature or Science magazine, well, duh. How many scientists want to be called loonies? How many of them want to lose their tenure? How many of them want to lose their homes and not be able to pay their bills? Because we all have to do that, even scientists. You underestimate the cultural and psychological and tacit compliance, the herding instinct of psychology that the people who manipulate our society know. Woody Black, what were you arrested for? Woody, I was arrested on suspicion of causing violent disorder, and I was released 10 hours later without charge. Watch my video about the Brexit protest. That's the most recent one, the Bojo Revolution. I explain all about it in there. James says, surely Kerry Unsworth has the inside track on this one. Who's she? I know Kerry Cassidy. Who's Kerry Unsworth? Huge asshole. Tommy Robinson spoke about Julian Assange inside. Has he? I mean, I subscribe to his channel. I'll have to see what he says about that. Sonia, they put all the politicals in there. It does seem that way, judging by the list of inmates, Sonia, definitely. It seems to be like that. That's why it's got the nickname of Britain's Guantanamo Bay. Nothing says, I didn't know you were up on 1645, 1715 solar minimum. I just got up to that point on Kev. I think it was one of the folks that reminded Kev one solar cycle's overlapping. Well, you know, we've had 2 deep solar minimums, nothing. So, yeah, I mean, the more minimum is, I mean, Piers Corbyn has talked about this. I mean, he's the brother of you-know-who, but he must be a bit of a black sheep, I imagine. Diego Rivera, the book contains no peer-reviewed scientific proof or examples of previous energy weapons demolitions or evidence of the weapon itself. Diego Rivera, please contact Andrew Johnson and ask him to debate, because Andrew he's written entire books about this, about his debates he's had. I disagree, obviously, but really I refer you to his books. I mean, read his books about this, because he answers this completely. He explains to you why you've made a mistake here. James Tilly Matthews says, yes, Ted Gunderson only married her, but was in regular contact with Michael Aquino. Funny enough, Michael Aquino was interviewed on the Basis Project. It was bad, actually, because it started getting interesting. It was only the last 4 minutes of the interview. It actually started getting interesting. Glenwood Stark. Hello, Glenwood. How are you? Welcome. James says, when are we going to have photographic evidence of the military-industrial jacuzzis on Mars? I don't know. I think when the secret space program comes up, I think, you know. David Schultz says, say, Ben, what are you reading lately in films? Right, well, I'm reading a book called The Dispossessed by Ursula Le Guin. It's a classic piece of science fiction, and it's very good. I'm reading it for the 3rd time. And it's kind of hopefully giving me ideas for my new novel that I'm writing. But it's not research. It's just putting me in a kind of frame of mind when I read these books. So that's my current project in reading. As for films, I watched The Joker. The Joker is actually pretty good. I did a Panway TV review of it, so go check that out. James has repeated his question about Mars. Stephen, Pluto is a dwarf planet. It is, yeah. It used to be it's because it's one of the Kuiper belts. That's right. James, I think a 10-hour open-air Steve Bassett conference outside number 10 will get things moving. Well, you know what? If Steve ever wants to do that, I'd be happy to set it up. Buxy, Richard Rudgley looks really interesting. Thanks. He is. He's actually his TV series Secrets of the Stone Age was all right, but it was a bit tabloid. I didn't like it much. But he wrote an interesting book which I read, and also he's done some interesting talks lately about anthropology, which I do think are pretty good. James, Mr. Nephilim Jones was arrested for public displays involving illegal mankini moves. James, that's our secret. Come on, I paid you. You shouldn't be saying this. Diego Rivera, Andrew Johnson is not a scientist. That is an ad hominem. James, why is he wrong? Read the book and tell me. You know, I could say anyone who says 2 + 2 = 5 is a moron. So therefore, 2 + 2 must be everyone who says 2 + 2 = 4 is a moron. And because of that, therefore, 2 + 2 = 5. Would you say that is a correct piece of logic there? Would you say it's logical to say that? Because if you don't, I've got to ask you why. Because you're doing the same thing here. Stephen says the book is the evidence. Correct, Stephen. The book is not opinion, Diego Rivera, and you haven't actually explained. As I said, you've not actually explained, apart from saying there's no other examples of directed energy weapons. Is that your only evidence? Is that all you have? Stephen, opt for fantasy. Yeah, correct, Stephen. Stephen, right. Where are we going now? Right. It's 2 hours 10 minutes. Anyone else? I've got 49 people watching. Is it all right if I call it a night, guys? What I'll do is I don't. When I'll do the next live stream, I don't know. Let me just check the news and see what's going on. Home. Oh, it's just still about the bodies that were found in the lorry. Nothing new on the EU decision, and we probably won't get anything new on that at the moment. We'll probably maybe have to wait tomorrow. What I'll do is I will not promise to do a live stream at any particular time. Well, tomorrow I'm doing the Herpanwo show, so there'll be nothing tomorrow, no videos, nothing. What I might do, if something big happens tomorrow, I'll do a live stream on Friday. It's okay, so that I hope that's a deal. I do have time on Friday to do it. In the meantime, James says, I know my ignorance stems from the Manted High Councils. Oh, right. Well, you've obviously been with Mr. Parts, haven't you? Yeah. Huge assault, South China Sea, Iran trigger, World War III. Yeah. We could, we may see that, definitely, yeah. Now, Stephen and Diego Rivera are now debating Dr. Judy Wood. I'm actually for suffice to say, I'm on Stephen's side in this. I think Dr. Judy Wood is correct, and I think Diego Rivera is wrong completely. Sonia says, of course 2 + 2 = 5, and we are all to blame for the weather. That's the logic these people use, Sonia. This is the skeptic logic. It's the debunker logic. It's all in there. It's an ad hominem, isn't it? It's ridiculous. It is. Anyway, night, Hugo Rune. Thanks for watching. And Stephen, yeah, you can go and watch the football now. And as James Tilly Matthews always says, good night. Keep your thighs to the skies and your ear to the ground. I will try to do both, and I'll hold that position for as long as I can until I start aching. Nothing says, I'm guessing Jeremy Corbyn is aware of his brother's understanding the probability of a cooling effect as a result of lack of solar activity. Jeremy Corbyn did a statement about it, and essentially, effectively, he did a bit of a cover. He was a bit embarrassed, I think. He did talk about his brother. Hannah Laurie, good night. Hannah Loney, sorry. Good night, Hannah. And Woden20, thank you very much. Thanks for watching. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Hugh says, don't forget your beers Friday. Hugh, oh my God. I'll see if I can. I mean, I might have to keep my wits about me. It depends what happens, but I'll get the beers in if there's all depends what happens. DJ, night. David, thank you very much. And Sonia White, good night to you too. And Stephen, I agree with you on this. I really do. Winslow Burdett has just turned out. He's just looked at his alarm clock. It's 9:11. Well, how about it is? It's I can see that now. It is 9:11. Night videos. Good night, Denise. Thanks for watching. Good night, Winslow. Thank you, all of you, for making this video what it is. As I've always said, I need you guys to make these live streams. I need you guys to do it, because otherwise it would just be sitting here in front of a camera talking to myself, and that would be very boring indeed, wouldn't it? So if it weren't for you guys, these live streams would not happen. So it's a combined effort, and I really appreciate all of you. Also, I've got to say thank you, all of you, for your comments you've left on the videos. I know it's been over 2 months now since the comments reply video. So as soon as the Brexit issue is, we know what we're standing with Brexit, my next video after that will be a comments reply video. I promise you. It'll probably be about 10.5 hours. All right. So thanks, all of you. Good night. God bless. And Woody Black, take care. And Lime Specs, good night. And I'll see you all soon on new videos coming soon. Tune into the Herpanwo show at 8 p.m. tomorrow night on Herpanwo Radio. And there'll be another live stream as soon as there's news. Take care, all of you. Hugs, nothing. And let's have Brexit now, Brexit hard.